Going to rise for the pledge, and then after that, if you so choose with us, we're going to have a moment of silence. Please keep all in our armed forces and those in public safety in your thoughts, and we continue to make sure that we keep in our thoughts Speaker of the House Michael Bush's family. He was laid to rest on Tuesday. I spent the day in Annapolis yesterday, and still see the lingering effects, which we will for quite some time, when a gentleman like that is no longer in that quaint little village. So we would ask that as well. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, we're down to 3 temporarily this morning. Commissioners Rothstein and Weaver are representing us at today's drug. What's the official name of that?
Drug Violence Awareness Expo.
Thank you so much. I knew you'd know it. Drug Violence Awareness Expo, which is at the Ag Center. So for those that are watching, it's supposed to be 70 degrees today. Stop watching and go out there. Because it's a great event, a lot of vendors and some great educational opportunities. Our 2 colleagues are representing us today, as Lieutenant Governor Boyd Rutherford is due to speak in about 10 minutes. So that's why they aren't here, but they'll be back as soon as they can. Priority Carol, I'll let my 2 colleagues, when they get back, if they get back in time, if we don't fly through this agenda, share some things. But in the interim, Commissioner Frazier.
Well, I went to the Special Ed Appreciation Awards banquet the other night. Don't remember what day it was. But anyway, the other night. And what this is for people that work with the special ed students in Carroll County Public Schools. And they're just kind of appreciated. And it's usually the recognition that comes from the family of the students, or actually sometimes from the students themselves. They write a little paragraph about what this person has done, it's meant to them, and it is really a well-done program. Also, there was actually a couple of students that were recognized in here because they were high school students that worked with the special ed students in their school and helped them out and so forth. So I thought, and I've been going to these for a few years now. I think it's the first time I've ever seen a student recognized in one of these, so that was really good. I also went to the 4-H Achievement Awards the other night. I don't remember. I think it was last night, 2 nights ago. It's been a busy week. And again, that's a great program with the people at the 4-H. And I was sitting in the audience before we give out the commissioner's tray, which goes to like the outstanding 4-H person of the year. It's my interpretation of it. That might not be theirs, but since it's commissioner's tray, that's the way I look at it. As I'm sitting here, you hear a lot about this 4-H chapter in Carroll County that win national awards, and the kids go on trips across the country. So I think a couple of them are actually going outside the United States for trips because of things that they've done for 4-H. So they're doing a tremendous job. Just want to give them a shout out.
Good. Commissioner Boucher.
I also attended the Special Education Award ceremony with Commissioner Frazier. It's heartfelt and touching. It takes very exceptional teachers to deal with that form of education, and I commend their service to the community. On Tuesday night, I attended the Union Bridge Ladies Auxiliary 80th Anniversary Banquet. Those ladies do a tremendous amount of work raising money for their fire department, and without their help behind the scenes, that fire department, along with numerous other fire departments in the county, would not be fiscally sound. So thanks to those ladies. And yesterday afternoon, Governor Hogan and Lieutenant Governor Rutherford were in my district in Mount Airy. They attended the memorial service for Ross Brinkley, the son of State Budget Director David Brinkley, who lost his battle with the opioid epidemic. It was very heartfelt and touching to see our governor come into our community and recognize the epidemic that is facing us all. My prayers go to the Brinkley family and all those other individuals throughout our community that are suffering from addiction, and the loved ones that are there with them. So I'd like to show my appreciation to the governor for coming to our county and recognizing this epidemic.
Okay. Just a couple things from me. I represented Carroll at the Baltimore Metro Council meeting last Friday. Still seeing the effects of the University of Maryland medical system fallout that continues to occur. I had a fairly lengthy conversation with interim mayor Jack Young, and it's interesting because he has taken that acting role, if you will, and run with it, and is making some what I think are very good decisions. But I reminded him that what happens in Baltimore City reflects on all of us in the metro region and across the state, and he's very well aware of that. And so, again, I had a good discussion with him, as well as the colleagues from across the state. All of the counties were represented there. So, had an interesting conversation with County Executive Johnny Olaszewski from Baltimore County, too. I guess you all heard that there's proposed tax increase down there. Anyway, that was an interesting conversation. I'll talk about that this afternoon, budget. So, and then Saturday night was the shock trauma gala, and I want to assure everyone that certainly we haven't seen any negative effects as it pertains to that particular branch of UMMS, and I'm going to talk about more of that later on in open admin. So, most importantly, we are going to recognize someone today, and Celine, are you leading this charge? I've got Christine Kaag listed here, but Celine, you're leading, right?
I'm going to invite Tiffany and Rich up to the table with me. and
Okay, very good.
We'll get started. So I'm, as you know, Celine Steckel, the Bureau Chief of Aging and Disabilities. I'm here today with Rich Otone, our Senior Inclusion Program Coordinator, and Tiffany Warner, who is our Instruction and Events Coordinator with the program. I'm going to turn things over to Rich to talk about why we're here today.
Morning.
Rich, good morning.
Morning. Earlier this week, Tiffany Warner, our Senior Inclusion Program Instruction and Events Coordinator, attended the annual Direct Supports Professional Conference hosted by the Maryland Association of Community Services, MACS. They're the official, basically our professional association for providers of DDA services. It's the first time that we've actually attended the conference. And each year, MACS requests nominations for their Excellence in Direct Support Award for those who work with individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We submitted a nomination for Tiffany for an award at the conference, and we were proud to share with you that she was selected as a recipient of the award, which was accompanied by a governor's citation. Just a little background on Tiffany. She was hired in February of 2017 as the Instruction and Events Coordinator. She came to the program with over 14 years' experience in both residential and day program services. Her experience was a very welcome addition to our team, especially myself. She displayed a drive and a passion for assuring that individuals with intellectual disabilities have the opportunity to plan and lead their lives in ways that make sense to them. Because she has stayed committed to improving our program and has served as a great example for her coworkers, we are proud to celebrate her as an Excellence in Direct Support Award recipient.
Very good. Congrats.
You want to also introduce Val?
Today
Yeah.
attending as well is Mr. Valentine Seehoff. He's a participant in our program. He's been with our program since 2003, and we're happy to have him here as well.
Very good.
And a member of the council, right? Commission on
The
Aging.
Commission
That's
on
true.
Aging
He's a
Disabilities.
member of the Commission on Aging.
Yep, very good. Well, is that it?
That's it.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, I thought there was more.
And
So,
we'd love to show you the awards that she
so we're going to
received
do
as well.
we're going to do a photo op here in a second. So, Dennis, you have, I don't want to take the charge here, but we certainly do appreciate
Thank you.
everything that you bring to the table for us here in Carroll. Everything that we do for our seniors is incredible. You're all of you do an amazing job, and it's very important because we have a very large senior population here in Carroll, and they are some of the smartest people in this county for a number of reasons that I won't get into today because then I'd get on my soapbox. but we should listen to what they have to say, because they sort of set the base here, and they're watching us very closely as we continue to govern here. So certainly do appreciate all that they bring. But thank you. That's quite an accomplishment.
Thank you.
So you need to say a few words on your behalf.
I promised her she wouldn't need to speak.
No, this is a pretty big deal for you, and we appreciate that. Whenever you get a good governor's citation in your hand, it bodes not only well for the county, but specifically for you.
Well, I want to thank all the people that I support, because they're the reason why I do have the drive that I do. And I also want to thank Rich and Celine and Christine for helping me become who I am and backing me up for all the stuff I want to happen for the people with intellectual disabilities. So thank you guys and the nomination.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Matt, you want to do a photo op? And there he is. It's a magical thing. Move her on up here, sir. I think you can get through there. Yes, you can.
I like this side.
Right in the middle. How's that? Okay. You got some, Christine.
That's a view.
Got it all? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Round of applause for Tiffany.
You got to notice Val's sign.
Yeah. The bad attitude, got that. Hey.
Thanks for coming.
I think they're moving. It never is. They public works is scooting out, it's like an inch a month in.
Yeah. See if they got a sledgehammer. Well, Justin's here, I could ask him. That little space in between those two things, Justin, right here, always gets a little tighter for me when I try to go through there. I don't know what
You
it
and me
is.
both.
So, next time you got your sledgehammer down,
Or at least a saw.
bring it out. Just give it a little push.
County has a
This
price
sign.
cut,
Oh,
that's
I know.
why, yeah, I'm not sure.
It's true.
Look into that.
Okay. Got it. Good point. Okay, first on the, let's move along quickly here. First on the agenda is the FY20 Homeless Solutions Program grant, and our Director of Citizen Services, Christine Kay.
Good morning.
And
Morning.
Scott. You can introduce Scott.
Joining me is Scott Yard, Executive Director for Human Service Programs. Each year, the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development provides state and federal funding for homeless services through a mix of formula and competitive dollars. Our score on the application will determine the amount of competitive funding we are awarded. Last year, you may remember, was the first, FY19 was the first year that all of the homeless service grants, the funding for our shelters was under one department, the Department of Housing and Community Development. Prior to that, there was split funding between DHR and DHCD. Last year, all of our dollars were formula funded, and I do want to let you know that for our FY19 application, Carroll County scored the highest in the state, 144 out of 145 points on our state application.
So it's a good thing to be high scored in this particular.
Well, we want to score just as high in this one because there's competitive dollars.
Okay. Yeah,
We didn't
sometimes
get-
the lower scores, you know what I'm asking? Sometimes the lower score is better, but
Oh, no, the
in this
high
case,
score-
the high
yes, the
score
high
is
score is
better.
better.
Okay. all
This
right.
is not the Masters.
Yeah, okay.
So if for FY20, there is a competitive there's a competitive piece this year. So this funding covers all of our shelters, which is the men's shelter, family shelter, women's shelter, cold weather, some rapid rehousing, and outreach. The total grant award is for $658,337. And you could see kind of how that's broken up down there on the chart. If you have any questions, Scott and I can certainly answer them for you. But I'll pass this over to Scott, who can give you a little bit of information about the specifics of the programs and who we're serving in those shelters.
Okay, Scott, good morning.
Sure. Each year, we serve approximately 400 individuals combined between adults and children.
What was that number?
Approximately 400.
Okay.
Last year was off the top of my head, I believe it was just under 390 individuals. And each year, we are set with new regulations and what's called low barrier housing first model. So we continue to try to figure out ways to create a larger amount of access and a quicker response to services. We've done some things with cold weather this year that we were pretty happy with, where we extended cold weather hours. We found ways to extend cold weather hours when it wasn't necessarily a weather threat, but we just wanted to be better partners with the community and with the county and provide those services. So we continue to look at those opportunities to try to provide more to Carroll County.
The other thing we did, I think that this was this year, the family shelter and the women's shelter switched locations. So the
Right.
family shelter is now in Distillery and the women's shelter is over on Green Street.
Right. Okay.
And with this year, we also have reorganized dramatically in HSP. We're trying to have all of our supportive services wrapped around our shelter programs. We want to increase, we want to get people housed in permanent housing faster, more income, and resilient and self-sustainable faster. So with our reorganization, our goal is to make homeless as rare and as brief as possible in Carroll County while partnering with the commissioners of citizen services.
The cold weather shelter is the only one that we have in Westminster, or there are other ones throughout the county?
That's it.
Just curious. Because, I
That's a
mean,
good question. It's-
I would think that we'd be looking to maybe put that in maybe a couple other spots, because unless you can get here, you might be, in some trouble.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's come up at, Circle Caring and COC, the Continuum of Care meetings. Do we need other locations? You have about typically 40 individuals a night at cold
Right.
weather. And the capacity for that building on Stoner is 25.
Right.
So there's overflow
Right.
over at the Rescue Mission and also at the Senior Center. So,
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, I actually worked there one night and saw it through the whole process. And it is very well used, and there's a lot of people, it's just, when I had my idea of that before I went there, is that there's beds here and all this other stuff, but there really isn't, except in the women's there's bunk beds over there, but where the men sleep, there's a mattress on the floor, and they put them in as tight as they can to get as many people in, and that's what has to be done. So I'm just thinking we could use another cold weather shelter, but I'm also thinking somewhere else in the county, because if you can't get there, how do you get to the shelter?
Right.
Right.
And these aren't people that are well off and have transportation and other means and stuff like that. So just,
sure.
like the next step.
One of the things we've talked about for this upcoming year is to look at our shelter system as a whole, because the state dollars, we don't expect will increase. But there's also different needs that I think we see as a COC, and we would have to kind of rearrange the shelter system for anything new we want to bring in, which we've talked about. And I know HSP is doing a community needs assessment
Yes.
soon, so we'll take the results of that and look at the COC continuum of care needs, and then kind of decide if do we need all these, does it make sense to have all these shelters in our community? Does it make more sense to focus on rapid rehousing and just have emergency shelter? It's hard, though, if you take something away, too, so
Right.
we don't want to leave any gaps if we change it.
Hate gaps.
Take gaps.
Do other municipalities ever transport homeless people into Westminster? Is there any, networking to help the homeless?
You typically find, because of the services and the soup kitchens and all the supportive services that a homeless person would take advantage of, you typically find that most individuals are going to find themselves in the Westminster city area.
So they gravitate to
They
Westminster?
do, because of the the transportation with the loops and different things like that, and with, from the community as a whole, from that, that homeless community, they tend to stay in the Westminster area. But there are homeless individuals in the outskirts.
I understand, that makes sense.
And we do outreach. We will go out and we do outreach, and we do coordinated intake at various different parts of the county. We will go out to the libraries and things like that to do intake appointments and things, because, if someone can't get to us, we need to go get to them. All right.
Actually, it's something I've also talked about in the past, is looking for somewhere else besides Westminster to put a homeless shelter. Your predecessor I talked with at length, but nothing happened. But let's leave it at that. I think it's something that should be looked at, I really do, because I know the soup kitchen's here, there's a lot of services here in this area, and I do appreciate that. But it doesn't mean that Carroll County, the Westminster should be the depository of all the homeless people in Carroll County. And some people can't get here. This is where I think, but they can't get here. And when I've talked to, I won't go into any detail, but other officials from other municipalities, they're all behind this until you say, well, have us put something in oh, no, well, we don't want that here. Well, it's got to go, it's got to be spread out a little bit. It really does, not only because I don't think it all should be in Westminster, but I also think it would help other areas of the county, because there's homeless people in those areas that need help as well.
We could share
So
too.
Scott, keep that in mind.
I wrote it down.
We could share with you too, by zip code, how many individuals we have served in the county by zip code. I don't have that here with me, but it's certainly something we could pull from the database and share with you.
So we can get a feel of how much it's impacting across the county.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
All right, any other questions?
I'll make a motion, the Board of Commissioners approve the submission of the FY20 Homeless Solutions Grant application and accept the award.
I'll second.
And the county match for this is coming out of the HSP allocated
Yes,
budget
sir.
for 20. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. All right, any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great.
Thank you.
Just
Thank
saying
you.
thank you for the continued
Thanks for your
partnership.
clarification and all that.
Thanks.
Have a good day.
You as well.
All right, turf mowing for county buildings and parks. We've got our Bureau Chief of Facilities, Justin McGonnell.
Got some information I want to hand out to you guys.
Okay.
Before we start. This is on the list of we contracted
You can throw.
out.
I'll throw one at each of these seats too, so they have it, Justin. So, thanks, sir.
And the next time you show up, you'll have the saw to cut these corners down.
What's that?
You'll have the saw next time to cut these corners down.
And before we get started too, Commissioners, I'd like to recognize Tom Robertson, 30 years of service at Carroll County Government, will be retiring after today. So I just wanted to bring that up to you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
37 years.
Yeah, Tom.
Thank you.
I didn't realize today was it, but congratulations to you.
Thanks, sir.
You've been a stellar employee here, as many are that put in the amount of years of service that we've seen. So thank you very, very much for
I
all that
appreciate
you've
it.
done.
Mhm.
And,
I've been fortunate to be here.
well, we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hopefully, will we be able to get a photo with them at the end or anything?
Yeah, we can get a photo before you get out of here. Yep.
Good.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, Justin, what do you have?
No,
Or,
I'll take it.
I'm sorry, Maureen, what do you have?
Good morning, by the way.
Good morning.
Yes, we solicited bids for contractors to provide labor, equipment, and materials for the mowing service of the various locations throughout Carroll County. We received 6 bids, and we are asking to award it to Chesapeake Landscape Group out of Sykesville, Maryland, in the amount of $64,717.92.
Okay. Have we used them before, Justin?
No,
we have not.
This is a new group,
Yes, sir.
because I don't recognize the name.
Mhm.
Are they new, or have they been around and we just haven't utilized them, or what's?
Some-
They've been around for about 8 to 10 years.
Okay.
And we just haven't had a chance to utilize them. They haven't bid on our projects.
Okay.
They're based out of Eldersburg.
Okay. I won't hold that against them, but that, No, that's good. I'm glad to see that, they're stepping up. So, a little bit of an explanation about what gets mowed by these folks as opposed to what we do ourselves, Justin.
Yeah, well, currently we, facilities maintains 55 buildings and roughly 434 acres with a staff of 18 employees. So that kind of runs us thin. So these properties that we went out to bid for the mowing contract are the outline areas where Mount Airy, it'd be kind of pointless for us to run down to Mount Airy to mow 2 acres of land when we can put up to the
So it's more
contractor to
cost
handle that.
effective.
Exactly. So that's kind of where we came up with the decisions on what properties we wanted to take out the bid. And some were just too big for us also, with all the other properties we maintain throughout the county.
How come you took I'll get in a second, the areas removed from the bid list, how come they're taken off? I mean,
We put those out for bid. We needed some figures for some internal information, and by doing it with this bid, we got some information we needed with our operation.
so,
was
but
just
these are removed
for-
from the bid list, who cuts it now?
It's removed from the bid list.
Yeah, but then
we
it
cut
still has to be cut.
Right, we-
Yes,
Oh, we're
we-
gonna
we're
cut it,
gonna keep
okay.
it in-house.
Right.
Okay.
But these were just informational figures that
Gotcha.
we needed for our operation.
All right.
So when you do these contracts, and here comes the 35-year lawn and landscape out of me that I used to run, are these bid weekly, as needed? How do you
18
guys?
to 24 cuts a year.
Okay, and that's based on the need?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. The Charles Carroll School, is that the ball fields? Okay, that's what I thought.
And a little bit down there by the pavilion, like a little section.
Yeah, a little set, right,
Yep.
got it, okay. Any questions on any of these as you go down the list of specific properties? All right. I'll make the motion that we award the contract for turf mowing for county buildings and parks to Chesapeake Landscape Group, $64,717.92
I'll
annual.
second that.
Any other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Hey, Matt?
That.
He's probably downstairs.
You want to take a photo here
No,
with
he's still
Tom?
here.
Thank you. Justin, you're in this too.
Okay. Yep.
Could you make us all a photo?
Of course.
That's what all right, thank you. Yes, sir. Thanks, Tom. Thank you. Okay. Hot mix asphalt paving, 2019. Deb Butler, our bureau chief in engineering. Maureen's coming back up. And Maureen, what do you have on this? See what I did there? I called on you first and not Debbie. See how I did that?
Thank you, I appreciate that. Just need a little introduction.
Yeah. I'll learn this job once I, hear quick soon, and then I'll be gone, so there's that.
I'm glad to hear that. Again, we did go out and solicit bids for the 2019 hot mix asphalt paving 2, and we received 3 bids. And we are asking for award to Gray and Sons for $4,916,650.40.
It's a lot of money. Deb,
So
you've got a
you-
list, right? that
I
you-
have a list.
Okay.
Was part of the package. We have a lot more subdivision roads in this particular contract. The total mileage is 17.35 miles. It's a little more involved than the one we brought to you previously. This one, we have a lot of inlet adjustments that we're doing, a lot of sidewalk, ADA improvements that we're making as well. So we're hoping to move forward. They'll have 110 working days to finish all the work.
Really?
So hopefully by the end of May, we can get them started.
Okay.
Any questions?
Nope, I was going to make a motion that we award the contract for the 2019 hot mix asphalt paving 2 to Gray and Son Incorporated in the amount of $4,916,650.40.
I'll second.
So that's the entire package, right, Debbie? I mean, everything will be done.
Yes, whatever we're doing, whether we're reclaiming it or milling and paving, pipe work's already handled with our initial project we put out this year.
Okay.
It looks like
All right.
that's 27 roads altogether. That's a lot.
Yeah. Well, when you get into the subdivisions and there's like a lot of small courts,
Those cul-de-sacs, right?
yeah.
That's why I make sure people are watching realize that that figure is large, but it covers a lot of work.
Yes.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Got a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you for supporting the program.
Okay. Roof replacements at Union Mills Homestead. Maureen Stays, and she's going to be joined by our Bureau Chief in Building Construction, Eric Burdine. Eric, good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Okay, again, this is for roof replacement at Union Mills Homestead, and a little bit of background on this is that we originally went out to bid for this project, and we did not get any responses. So then we went and tried to find some companies that did this type of work, and we sent out, I believe it was 3 quotes, and only one responded, and that was the company name is Heavy Timber Construction, and then that they were the only one responded. We decided to go ahead and ask for your concurrence to award this project, and it lists the cost of each roof that's going to be worked on in Union Mills, and it's not to exceed the amount of $434,096.73.
Is this what we expected the budget to come out to for this? Because there's only one bid, so, I mean,
We were within 1,000 of what.
so we thought it would be somewhere right around this,
Yes,
okay.
exactly.
So the scope of this work, Eric, and maybe the timeline here, give us a little background. I mean, I know it's, when you hear heavy timber construction, it kind of perks your ears up a little bit, but maybe a little bit of familiarity with the way in which those buildings are over there would help as well, because,
Absolutely. So all 4 of those roofs are, they're cedar shake shingles. And so we're going to replace what's currently on there with a 24-inch long. And it's a Blue Label #1 Certigrade Western Red cedar shingle. And it'll be 7/8 inch thick. So it's thicker than what's currently on there. So we're replacing it with a little better product. All this had to be approved by Maryland Historic Trust. And so every material that we're using down to the nails has been approved by the Maryland Historic Trust on this project. And I will say for Fitzgerald's Heavy Timber, we've used them in the past. So they replaced the Miller's House roof at Union Mills. And they did a wonderful job there. They're very professional and very respectful to our historic property there. And we're comfortable that they know or that we'll get the project done per the Maryland Historic Trust guidelines.
okay.
I'd like to express my appreciation to the tour Commissioner Rothstein and I had at that facility, and going up into the attic and seeing that old world craftsmanship. That's when people realize that this isn't just like a typical roofer job. This is authentic historical work to reflect what was originally installed on the house. So this is very specialty work.
Yes, it is. I also point out that there is a $100,000 grant and a state bond bill for this project as well.
That's what I thought. Does this figure reflect that or not?
No, that's the quote from the contractor, so.
So it'll be less than that based on the grant?
That's correct.
Okay, what's the timeline here on these 4
So
roofs?
our challenges are going to be working around Union Mills' tours and events So we'll be bringing them in and out as we can get them in there to do these roofs.
Okay.
So we're probably looking over the next year,
Right.
maybe going into next year as well to finally get all this done. But again, the challenge is going to be working around Union Mill's schedule.
Okay. Is there any anticipated unforeseen wear and tear on the structure? Shingles aside, any?
We don't know. We don't foresee any of that. But what we do in this price as well is an allowance for all four structures, $22,000 allowance for things that may need replaced once we start tearing those shingles off. Dean will be there, project manager. He'll be there with them, and if a rafter or a purlin needs replaced, he'll be there to ask them to replace it.
They'll
So
roll that into the
there's
project.
money in there to do that, so we don't have to stop the project.
Okay.
And you had previously had structural stabilization work done in the roof? 'Cause I thought I seen some new work up in there.
It's been done in the past. We have another project that we were replacing a beam in the attic, but I think what you're referring to was done quite some time ago
Okay.
as well before I was here.
It looks newer compared to the original stuff. Put it in perspective, right?
Okay. Any other questions on this?
Just take care of all the roofs down there then? All of them will be replaced?
The main structures, yeah.
There's a couple.
There's still like privy and
Yeah, there's a
a
couple
bathroom
outbuildings.
structure and, yeah, a scale house, so some smaller roofs, but we weren't anticipating replacing those at this time.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to move that we award the contract for multiple roof replacements on various buildings at the Union Mills Homestead to Heavy Timber Construction in the not-to-exceed amount of $434,096.73.
I'll second that.
Anything else on this project? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Well done.
Thank you.
Okay. Resolution for the deposit account is something we do pretty on an annual basis. And our comptroller, Mr. Rob Burke, and he's bringing some folks along, and I'll let Rob do the introductions, even though I could do it. I'll let you do it.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Before you this morning with a resolution and agreement for deposit account for our primary deposit relationship with BB&T Bank. Anytime we have change in authorized representatives, they ask that we do a corporate resolution to officially designate individuals who have authority to do banking. We are in the middle of some staffing transition in our office and have some people in new roles. So Jennifer Hobbs, to my right, will assume the role of Bureau Chief of Accounting in the next several weeks. And Bobby Joe Fout will assume the role of Investment Officer, the role that Jenny currently assumes. So we've got some promotions coming, and with that change in role, we need to allow them to be able to do the banking work that they're required to do.
Congratulations.
So we are.
Congratulations, ladies.
Yes.
I hope this doesn't affect the Little League baseball activity, right, Jennifer?
Absolutely not.
There you go. It's very important. Okay.
So our designation of individuals will remain the same roles as they have been, which is one commissioner. Commissioner Weaver is the designated representative on the banking, as he has been since the beginning of his term. Myself in the comptroller role, the Bureau Chief of Accounting, Jennifer Hobbs, and the investment officer, Bobby Joe Fout. So those are the designated individuals to do our banking. So, as I said, this is the standard corporate resolution that BB&T prepares. I just ask that the board adopt that with those changes.
Very good. Pretty cut and dry. Just a matter of procedure, Ms. Wyndham.
Yeah.
Do the five of us need to be here to do this, or is the majority good with this? I just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
Okay.
Got to make a motion, the Board of Commissioners adopt a resolution and agreement for deposit account with BB&T.
I'll second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Very good. I'll leave
And
that for you.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Congratulations on the promotion.
Thank you.
All right. I think you're right, Dennis. You said something about flying.
Going through.
All right, Notting Carroll, after-school program funding. Health Officer, Mr. Ed Singer.
Good to see you again, Mr. Singer.
Good to see you. Morning, Commissioners.
He's kidding.
Stepped away from the big event to be here with us this morning, and then he will fly right back out again.
So I guess just as background, last year, well, we've had a senior policy group on the opioid issue meeting for a couple of years now, and last year at some point in time, the commissioners came to us and said, hey, we're going to fund $300,000 in Notting Carroll funding towards initiatives that you think are outside of the box as a senior policy group and you think need to be done, but you can't seem to find the funding for. So the group had already kind of identified a couple of things that we thought were the biggest gaps in Carroll County, and we've talked to you about these a couple of times when I've been in here, and Doug Brown, who was co-chairing that, and is now Valerie Hawkins is on that group with me, and had talked to you about some of the things that we wanted to do, and I'm going to cover what we did last year. And I know there's been some discussion about reducing the amount of funding for this year, but kind of caught us in the middle of where we were going, and I kind of want to let you know where we are and fill you in on that and kind of get some direction as to where you all want to take this. So for last year, there were several things we did, and at the time of year when we found out we had the funding available, it was difficult for us to stand up new programs in the middle of a fiscal year that were going to be ongoing, understanding that this was intended to be ongoing funding. The only one, out of the things that are listed here on this PowerPoint presentation, the only thing that was on here that we thought was going to be ongoing was the expanded support to the mobile crisis team. Now, I mentioned the senior policy group had identified mobile crisis, or not having any crisis services in Carroll County as one of our biggest gaps. So what we did was we established a mobile crisis team. We used the grant funding from the Opioid Operation Command Center, which was about $135,000. The health department was able to get some funding through a grant program. It was the Substance Treatment Outcomes Program, and we were able to use some matching money from the health department to stand up this mobile crisis team, which is essentially it is operating 7 days a week from 9 a.m. till midnight, helping law enforcement and emergency services respond to folks who are in crisis, whether it's substance use, behavioral health, whatever. And during that time period, we've essentially reduced the number of EPs to the hospital by about half. Instead of people going to the hospital, we're being admitted there, we're linking them with services, and this team's actually responding out in the field and assisting law enforcement and EMS in dealing with folks that might otherwise wind up unnecessarily in the hospital with behavioral health issues. So what we talked to you about with this Notting Carroll funding last year was using $135,000 of this because we were talking about potentially wanting to expand the number of teams or expand the hours, and I don't think the hours were necessarily, we looked at it and we didn't think we necessarily needed to expand the hours, but we needed to expand the response capability in the team so we could cover more calls. And I think the most efficient way to do that, we decided, was to essentially establish a call center. So what you agreed to do last year with the Notting Carroll funding was you provided $135,000, and we had the contractor hire staffing for a 7-day-a-week, 12-hour-a-day team to handle calls. And during that the time period between July 1st of last year and February of this year, they've handled 1,100 calls. So these are calls that the response team would have otherwise had to handle, whether they're follow-up calls linking people with services or whether they're follow-up calls to the individuals trying to make sure that they've gotten to the appointments, whether it's substance use or other behavioral health services. This call center has been an essential part of this mobile crisis effort that we have. And we've cobbled together a bunch of sources of funding to make this work. And it's, law enforcement, if you talk to your folks in law enforcement and EMS, they've been raving about what this team's some of the work that's been able to take off of their plate and put in an appropriate direction. So we would like to see that continued this year as part of this Not in Carroll effort, and it was funded last year, and we kind of explained all that to you when we talked about this. The other things just highlight the other things that the funding was used for last year. There was one-time funding for a psychiatric nurse practitioner startup at CCYSB. The idea was when essentially you get a new practitioner, it's hard for them to generate enough billing revenue to support themselves, and there was a need for a psychiatric nurse practitioner at CCYSB to support dual-diagnosed patients who had substance use and mental health issues. And so the CCYSB has hired this person, they're on board, and they expect to be able to support them through billing going into the future. So that was truly one-time funding. Another one-time funding request was $43,000 to support Sources of Strength. Essentially, this was to train the trainers for Carroll County Schools so that within their own resources within the school system that they'd be able to expand this program out into other schools throughout the county. He piloted a Street Smart Positive Lifestyles program with the Boys and Girls Club, purchased a vehicle for CCYSB for their assertive community treatment team, and we're pending the Behavioral Health Resource Guide printing because I'm trying to see if the OOCC had some end-of-year money and we submitted some projects to them, and if they fund this, ultimately the county can keep the $15,000. If not, you guys had already approved that you would fund this reprinting, so we're waiting to see whether the OOCC gives us the money or not. We'll spend the state's money before we'll spend yours. So that's it for last year. Do you guys have any questions about that before I move on to what we're going to talk about in FY20?
No, the only request that I have, Ed, is to make this in printed copy available to us so that I can make sure
Certainly.
that Ed and Dick are
Yep.
have
It's on
this
the
in front of
desktop
them.
here, so we can just take this and
Yeah,
get it to
yeah,
them,
we'll
right?
make sure we get that. Yep, okay.
Okay.
Now, any questions on the 19 funding? All right.
So FY20, I already talked about the mobile crisis team, and we'd like you to continue to support that with the $135,000 for the call center, because if you don't, essentially, I guess we'd need to notify affiliated Sante. They'd have to reduce their staffing, and we'd have to modify the contract with them. So we can, that's something you all can consider as to where we go with that. The other piece, we were in the middle of working on the after-schools program, and I talked to you about this on a number of occasions, that Steve Guthrie, probably 2 or 3 years ago, when he was the superintendent of schools, said, biggest problem we have is we've got a problem with these middle schoolers after school who are struggling with things in their lives. And we were kind of looking at what was happening here in Westminster with Boys and Girls Club and what they've been able to do with the middle school population that we thought was very positive. And Steve's statement was, well, we'd open up the schools if we could get a vendor to come out here and provide after-school programming. So the overall group, the senior policy group, thought that this was something that we ought to be looking at. We've been struggling trying to find any type of funding for it, and when the commissioner said last year we're going to put out this Not in Carroll funding, Doug Brown and I decided that, well, we'd like to take a look at this, and we figured out last year really quickly that we weren't going to be able to implement anything in last fiscal year. So what we talked about doing was putting an RFP out to essentially get proposals from vendors about what they would do if the schools were opened up, and we were looking at doing after-school programming at the schools. So these are the, well, oops, I'm missing myself a page. So the idea was to have after-school programming to support at-risk middle school students. We went through this RFP process. We have proposals back. The programs, the idea that we had was we wanted to try to do programming in schools outside of Westminster, because Boys and Girls Club is essentially supporting the needs of the middle schools here in the Westminster area, and we wanted to try to reach the kids that were outside of the Westminster area. So we actually got a couple of proposals back. I've got some information just in general. We haven't gotten back to any of the vendors or anything, because this is a little different than your normal process because normally you've approved funding before we move forward with something. We wanted to have proposals and figure out what it would cost before we came and talked to you about it. So essentially, we have these proposals back that are pending, this decision whether or not you want to fund this. So the proposals consist of 2 or 3 day programming, and essentially, the 2-day programming obviously is less expensive in the first year and beyond that. It's easier to manage in the first year, and it's only one set of staffing for the vendor to handle those 2 days. The 3 days is obviously more time and support for the kids in the program, but it's obviously more expensive. So what we're looking at is, if we went forward with a 2-day programming in the first year, in this fiscal year, we'd be looking at a cost of $96,000, $96,014. We'd be looking at doing programming in Northwest Middle School and North Carroll Middle School, as those were essentially identified by folks on the senior policy group as being the areas of our greatest need right away. If you went with 3 years, obviously, it's much more expensive, and I think that the vendor might actually find it more difficult to implement a 3-day program in this fiscal year. So what the impact would be, and I didn't see the presentation you guys, the meeting where you guys talked about reducing this funding, but when we were originally thinking about this, we were thinking that there was $300,000 and a 3% planned increase for the out years, but essentially what we'd be looking at this year, if you want to establish an after-school program, is with this $96,000, if you continue to fund the call center, a total of $231,014 to get this program up and running and to continue to fund the call center. So.
But that's year one.
That's year one.
And even when we first put the money aside for non-Carroll, it was only $300,000.
Well, that's
So-
$231,000.
Yeah, I know, but I'm looking at year 3.
Okay, so let's talk about year 2 and year 3. And we don't have to expand beyond the 2 schools that we have if you guys don't want to. If we're just talking about the 2-day program, if we expand it to, in year 2, Northwest Middle School, North Carroll Middle School, Sykesville, and Mount Airy, we'd be looking at a total of $332,000. Now, if we went with what was originally in the funding you all had set aside, if you went with a 3% increase, there'd be $318,000 available by the time we get to year 2, and we'd be about $14,000 over that with the year 2 funding if you wanted to move forward with
I
that.
have
We
to say,
don't have to do it.
I don't remember, I could be wrong, but I don't remember adding a 3% increase to that. I thought it was just $300,000 flat going forward. And when we originally put it in, it was one-time money that we might have looked at this. As of right now, with the votes that we've taken for the budget, we've actually cut that by, I think it was $50,000 to $250,000 a year right now. And to be honest with you, I don't know where that's going.
Right.
I mean, I like the idea. It sounds good. I'm not sure where the money is.
Right, I'm not
You
sure.
do, if you continue, just because you have, it was $300,000, and the vote was to reduce it by 50.
Right.
So that left you 250. If you did the $135,000, I'm having a brain cramp on the mobile
For the
crisis.
mobile crisis.
Right.
It's a mobile
The mobile
crisis.
crisis, that would leave you with $115,000
So,
going forward.
right, so we could do that 2-day program for the
Yes.
2 schools. Is it 2 schools? 2 schools
Yes.
that are mentioned in
Correct.
year 1, and we
Right.
could fund that.
Right. And that
And you
could be-
don't, you don't need to make a decision on what you're going to do.
Right.
I wanted to put this out here for you so
Right.
that at least you could be thinking down the line as to whether or not, we want to look at expanding this, and maybe we have, we ultimately, if you decide that the $250,000 is going to be available next year, and we're going to use it for the mobile crisis, and we're going to use it for this 2-day program, we could come back and talk about how it's been implemented, whether we feel like it's been successful and that type of thing next year. But I think it's important to kind of, this is where we were headed with, this is what we would, if we were able to do this, this is what we would want to support so that we'd be able to provide essentially this type of programming in all of our schools throughout the county, because considering if Westminster's covered by Boys and Girls Club, by the time you get to year 3, we were talking about bringing in the Shiloh and Oklahoma middle schools. Essentially, we'd be running 4 sites, but those students would also be served by the schools that are by Sykesville and essentially remotely by Sykesville and North Carroll middle schools, which are not extremely far away from those schools.
I have a question about sources of strength. I know the
Sure.
school system went to, I think it's 4 schools this year, and they're looking to expand to 8 schools next year on that. Where's that funding going to be coming from? School system's going to pay for that out of their own pocket?
So the funding that you guys provided to that was essentially to provide training to the staff. So the way that Sources of Strength works is you're supposed, the concept is that they use the internal staff to provide the support for this program. It's a program that doesn't necessarily require staffing. It requires the faculty and the administration of the schools to support the programming. And they do this during their, I guess, different schools call it different things, but they do this during their time when they have like a flex time or, right. So they do this during the school day. So it doesn't require necessarily funding from the school system. It requires it to be coordinated and the school system be dedicated to doing it.
I went to the Sources of Strength presentation they had over at the board, whenever it was last month.
Right.
And I thought they were asking for some additional funding for this.
They haven't, I told the school system and I told Jim Rodriguez when we asked for this funding from you that it was one time only. If they're asking somebody for money, they're not asking.
I'm not saying they're
through
asking for
me.
us. I thought there was additional
I'm not-
funding that was needed for this program.
They haven't asked me for additional money. I told them that this was going to be one-time money to help them expand their program. So if they're asking for additional money from somebody, they haven't asked me, and they haven't, as far as I know, they haven't asked the commissioners for that.
Well, Mr. Hill, since you're sitting back there, do you have any information on this?
Microphone.
Yeah, come up.
Or come up to the table.
Ed, don't bite.
At least not really hard.
Being the director of middle schools, we're supporting the expansion of the program. As of right now, working with Jim Rodriguez and Chris Tobias, they haven't come to me for any additional resources. We used your money to send the 4 people out to be trained, and 2 of my principals, Jamie Carver and Amy Gramado, are now trained, so the plan is for them to train our other schools and for us to move forward. So my knowledge, I don't know of any additional funding that was asked
So
for.
that I wouldn't want to start the program, and they needed, I can't remember, I thought it was, top of my head, I'm thinking $13,000, $18,000, something like that.
Yeah.
Not as much as the original, but some additional funding for that.
Right.
And if you're going to expand it, I mean, I believe it's going very well. Let's not drop it. But we want to make sure we have money for all of this.
I just came over from the Drug Expo, and there were Sources of Strength people there helping kids to understand it, and it's a very positive, proactive way of dealing with this issue that we have with the drugs and the opioid and just general well-being of kids.
And the school system, obviously, I'm glad to see you here. I didn't make everybody come out to this presentation. I figured I'd be on the firing line today, but the school system and everybody's been collaborating on what this after-school program is going to look like. And we've talked to Mr. Hill about, you know, what support they'd be able to provide as far as facilities and equipment and things to try to engage these folks after school. And the other conversation that we had, and I think I brought this up in a previous presentation to you all, is that they're not necessarily, Sources of Strength in this after-school program would be complementary. They're not conflicting or duplicating each other. And what we're trying to do is provide some supports for kids who don't have those supports in the home after school. So.
I like seeing this initiative before us because I don't like the fact that we potentially would allocate money and not know how it's being applied. I think all of us are learning that this opioid epidemic is taking a lot of different avenues to address, and I think we're realizing also that more and more students are being introduced to addiction at a younger age. So the further in front of that we get, the better off we are, and these investments can lead to us having less adult addicts in the future. So I applaud you for having this initiative before us.
And students are being impacted in different ways with the opioid crisis. Sometimes it's not the direct addiction, but it's another family member who's affected, it's a friend.
There's
It has
students that
much
deal with
more
parents that
far-reaching
are
effects.
addicts, and that weighs on them psychologically.
Yes.
So the other thing that I want to add is I went to the nationwide conference on behavioral health last, about 2-3 weeks ago, and they were talking there about a study that was done in Columbia University where, everybody, I've told you before, everybody wants to be able to measure the outcomes of the things that they're doing. The problem is it's hard to measure the impact you're having on a middle school kid when they're 25. But the thing that I learned there that was shocking to me is 90% of the folks who are in active addiction that are adults started using some type of substance when they were adolescents. The brain's not fully developed until you're 25, and you're developing these behaviors at that adolescent age, and I just think that anything that we can do from a prevention and intervention standpoint at this age is key, and there's just not a lot of funding out there anywhere else. And when you all said that try to think of something that's outside the box, I think that's why we turned some of our focus on this, because if 90% of them are starting with some type of substance, and it may be tobacco or something else, and we all know that the prescription pharmaceuticals are driving a lot of this too, but it's that addictive behavior at a young age that people might start with that we want to prevent, so that we don't have to. It's so much harder it's like any other chronic disease. Once a person's an adult and they have the disease, trying to treat that disease is so much more expensive and so much more difficult. If somebody comes down with diabetes, it's so much harder to treat than it is if we prevented it from happening. The same thing with substance use addiction. If we can prevent people from becoming the 25 and 30-year-old substance use addict, and we don't have to treat them, it's much well better spent. So it's I know that you guys are struggling with your budget decisions this year, but we were in the middle of going through this, and this is kind of where we are on this, and I wanted to lay out what the 3-year kind of plan was so you could see where we were headed with this. When Doug and I talked about this, Doug was like, well, we ought to just tell them we want to do all 5 schools this year and see what they say. And I don't think the vendor couldn't support that anyway. Through our RFP process, we knew they wouldn't be able to meet that challenge, even if we did have all the money in the world to give them. That needs to be well thought out and gradually implemented so that we're successful. So this is kind of what the 3-year plan would look like. If you guys decide to move forward with this year, and you decide you don't want to go any further next year, we can flat fund this right where it is and continue with just those 2 schools and continue with the call center. But if we think this is a good thing and we decide, it gives you an opportunity to think about, next year, if we're looking at this is how much more money we're going to need to come up with if we want to expand it to other schools. And if we want to take it beyond this is where we'll be year 3. So I think having that laid in front of you at least lets you be thinking in advance as to, where will we come up with this from? Is it important? And, what do we want to do? So
we'll take it under advisement this afternoon. We're not going to make any decision now.
That's fine.
And for the record, there's been a little conversation about we decided to cut funding to that program. I want to reiterate how our system works with the budget. I mean, we take votes that are placeholders only. And for the record, I did not vote to decrease any funding to this, as other colleagues did.
And it might not.
Speak
it might
for
not
yourself
stand
when
that
you're
way.
talking about this.
Okay. I do have another question. Actually, I'm asking for additional information. If Sources of Strength needs additional funding for this coming year, we need to know that like today.
Okay.
Just let us know, because it would be put in with this money, and it would be I'd like to try to do all this stuff, but I'd like to know how much it's all going to cost.
I'll share that with Dr. Lockhart.
That's great.
And I guess if you were talking about a level of $250,000 of funding for the Not in Carroll initiatives, we're looking at $231.14 for the things that I put on the table. So there is potentially $20,000 available there that would give you some flexibility.
Was any of these requests given to the OOCC at this particular program?
This particular stuff, there's not any. It wouldn't fit into the categories that they would be able to fund. And the stuff that I actually got a response back, and I could talk to you about all, I don't think we
Okay.
need to get into it here on
Okay.
some of the stuff that we had submitted for end of year. They were asking for end of year proposals.
Right.
And it was, you got to spend it by June, so this
Yeah.
wouldn't work. I mean, this is
for.
this is ongoing type
beyond,
money, but we
right.
did get
Okay.
some, we're apparently getting some end of year money, and we can talk about that at a later time.
Okay. I didn't know if we do get some of that end of the year money, whether we could,
It's not
reassign it
anything you
to to something like this.
Yeah, it's nothing that, it's not
Okay.
helpful with something like this, because we're trying to implement a program as opposed to go out and buy something.
Right.
Because if end-of-year money is really good for going out and buying something, it's really not good if we're talking about trying to implement programming.
All right, we're going to need copies of this for.
Already done.
Okay.
Now,
Anything else?
I would ask that, your procurement folks, we have not notified the vendor one way or the other as to where we're headed with this and whatnot. So it is, in order for them to implement this, and I don't know where you guys are in your decision-making process, and I don't want to push it, but we do need to get back to the vendor in a relatively reasonable amount of time, because they're going to need time to plan and
Like a
hire
month?
staff and implement it within a month. Yeah,
Yeah,
a
I mean,
month I would
bet-
think would be fine, so.
You'll have it by then.
Yeah.
Trust
Okay.
me, because
Within a month.
we're coming down the line here very,
Yep.
very soon, so.
Okay.
Okay.
So if you need me to come back to discuss a decision on this at some point in time, just let me know. We'd be glad to do that.
Okay.
But I think you have the information at this point in time, and if you have any further questions, or if the two commissioners who weren't here would like to discuss this further, I'd be glad to come back and talk some more about it.
We will
We'll send them
definitely
over
do
to
that.
you.
Yep.
You send them over to see me.
Definitely do
Okay.
As a former principal of a school that had an after-school program very similar to this, there are a lot of positive impacts that it makes on children that are in a much better environment, getting a much more positive interaction with adults than a lot of times they would have if they were just out there alone.
Yeah.
Well, I applaud your initiative trying to address the at-risk middle school students. This could be a tremendous long-term investment that will reap the dividends of.
Oh, and just as a side note, we stuck Christine Kay with managing this if it goes forward. Her department's going to oversee
Okay.
the contract if the county decides to move forward with the after-school program.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, very good. We'll certainly share this in the.
Thank you, gentlemen.
In-between time today, too, with our
Thank you.
two colleagues.
And thanks for stepping up there, Mr. Hill. Appreciate it. This happens when you walk in here, you get pulled up.
All right, unless you want to make public comment, Denise, I don't think we have anything for that. Let's do agendas. I know our colleagues were about 10 minutes away, but I think they're,
Nothing else to
it
do?
went a little bit longer than what they thought. I've been in contact with them, so.
Yeah, Lieutenant Governor can talk.
They could be flying in here at any time. But let's go through agendas real quick. The week of April the 22nd. A reminder, before we do these agendas, for those that are still watching, tomorrow the county offices are closed in observation of Good Friday, so I want to make sure folks know that. The week of the 22nd, on the 23rd, we have all-day budget deliberations scheduled. Wednesday, the 24th, is the EAGB meeting, Economic Alliance of Greater Baltimore, Commissioner Rustine. And at 4:30 is the Drug Treatment Court graduation at Carroll Community College, where all five of us are scheduled to attend. Thursday, the 25th, open session, HVAC replacements, and consultant construction inspection management services contracts, Cascade Lake Stream restoration, Mayberry Gun Club stream restoration, and budget transfers for Carroll County Public Schools.
I'm not sure that 11 o'clock.
And 11, possibly, CCV update. Also that day, at 1 PM, Humane Society Tour, Commissioner Boucher. 5:30, Youth of the Year Award at the Boys and Girls Club, myself, and Mount Airy Middle School Battle of the Books at Mount Airy Middle, obviously, Commissioner Boucher. Some of those schools flip around, so.
Right.
Friday, the 26th, is the Historical Society's anniversary celebration at the Antrim. I'll be attending that. It's also the Eldersburg area Battle of the Books. That's at Century, Commissioner Rothstein. Mr. Weaver has the report, and it's also the Kids Fishing Rodeo at Westminster Community Pond at 1:30 on Sunday, the 28th. Commissioner Frazier.
Don't outfish those children now.
Don't worry.
All right, Tuesday the 30th, or the week of April 29th, Tuesday the 30th, we have budget in the morning, if need be. And I
No,
would suspect.
That's
if
the
we-
release of the proposed budget.
Oh, is it the release?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right, it is, okay.
You'll be done by then, hopefully.
Okay. Wednesday, May 1st is the Carroll County Board of Education Budget Work Session. Commissioner Weaver, that's at 4 p.m. Planning and Zoning is at 6 p.m. Commissioner Rothstein. Thursday, 7 a.m. is the Carroll County Sheriff's Office Prayer Breakfast. All 5 of us will be attending. Open session on the 2nd. Public Safety Training Center update. Airport bond financing discussion. Thursday, May the 2nd, also at 1:30 p.m. is our joint meeting with the Board of Education. Obviously, all 5 of us will be at that. And then Ted goes out and presents the budgets at 5 different locations. Certainly, we're going to have our public hearing, and welcome to attend those, as some of us have before. And sometimes I've elected to let Ted do the solo show, because sometimes the questions are better pointed to him. But that's up to my colleagues. And the first one is at Mount Airy Library at 7 p.m. That Thursday, May the 2nd. Friday, May the 3rd, Commissioner Rothstein will be participating in an activity with Carroll County Tech Council in Mount Airy. Special Needs Prom is at South Carroll at 10:45 a.m. on the 3rd. That's Commissioner Weaver. Union Mills Homestead Flower and Plant 50th Anniversary Opening Ceremony. That's myself. And at 5 p.m. is also another reception, a little bit different there. I think one of our state legislators will be joining that group. Right now, it's myself and Commissioner Boucher, and Commissioner Frazier has the weekly report. So that's the agendas. Any changes or corrections there? So for the 2 colleagues, first of all, I want to thank you guys for representing us at the Drug and Violence Awareness Expo. Priority Carroll, and I think you'll both probably talk about what you just saw out there. So I'll give you the opportunity at this point to share anything you had for Priority Carroll. Commissioner Rothstein.
Yeah, I think just very quickly, it's fresh on our mind. The Lieutenant Governor addressed a packed house of 8th graders. The high schools and middle schools are going through the Drug Awareness Expo right now. It is a lot of energy, a lot of information being shared, and just a lot. And Lieutenant Governor shared with us his appreciation for everything that we're doing in the county to put this in the forefront of these kids' minds. So.
And I just will share, he created his agenda today around this event. So he spent time here with a lot of the middle schoolers at this time, and to see, I don't know how many, 300-400 middle schoolers sit there as attentive as they were for that length of time was amazing. And he had a very good message, and appreciate him coming out and talking to the young people. And this is, I think, where we need to go to for drug awareness. The younger, the better, and we just keep continuing this. Education is a key component of stopping this epidemic.
So, anything else for Priority Carroll from either?
Not that I can think of
guys?
right now.
Okay, very good. All right, thank you for representing out there. And by the way, for those that are still watching, that goes until 4 p.m. today, I think. Is
I
that
believe
correct?
so. I think it's
Yes.
And I
till
think
4.
that the governor's chairman of the Office of Crime and Prevention will be there at 1 o'clock, I believe. Glenn Fuchsen will be
Yes.
there.
Yeah,
And he's
1 o'clock.
always got a good message as well. Anything else for open admin? We did have a presentation this just wrapped up on the Not in Carroll funding. We're going to provide written copies for you 2 guys to look at, as that will probably be talked about this afternoon as we continue with our budget.
Something I wanted to say when you guys brought up, okay, I just want to be very clear. There's a lot more funding than just this $300,000 for the whole Not in Carroll
Right.
program.
Correct.
And
Right.
I just want to
Right.
make sure everyone's
Yep.
aware, including the public. You fund over $2 million
Right.
for nowadays for for various Not in Carroll initiatives that go to YSB, the sheriff's office, as well as the health department and the state's attorney's office. So this additional $300,000 was put in the budget in FY19, and it's just added to the existing money. So the entire program's a lot bigger than, I just want to make sure that everybody's got that mindful,
Yeah,
that
this
this
was a-
isn't only, this
No,
is one
This was a line
facet.
item that we put in for recurring costs
That we're
came
sort of,
up
right.
sort of out of the typical timing that we see, so that's what we did.
Right, and I think Ed characterized it well as sort of you guys were looking for sort of out-of-the-box ideas,
Right.
something different that would
Yep.
check a different box
We're-
from the
yeah.
ones that were checked already by those other organizations I mentioned.
Which becomes continually critical to think out of the box as we're still not, we're still challenged with this, this evil. And so whatever it's going to take. And, we can have more of that discussion this afternoon
afternoon,
in
right.
open session as well.
Yep.
But open admin, I just do want to share very quickly, I had a very good meeting with our staff, our economic development staff, along with the college, community college, and the Miller Center, and the SBDC on how to get the best effects of all of them and others for small business in Carroll County. So there may be a little bit of reshuffling of how we're going to be doing business. I'm going to present that to you, so people, the key factor in doing this is, the one word I heard a lot is confusion. There's continuing to be confusion on where small business go within the community to get the best results they can get. And that's really what this discussion had to do with. It is not going to be changing much of roles and responsibilities, but it may be moving around some of the deck chairs to get people less confused on where to go on taking care of their small business needs. So more to follow on that.
Excellent.
Just one, Commissioner Frazier, you mentioned 4-H Achievement Banquet.
I did.
Yep, they both did.
And
Fantastic
Commissioner Weaver was
event.
there as well. I didn't mention that part, though.
Okay, but fantastic event to see.
And now you did. Okay. All right, I've got one thing for consideration before we recess. Commissioner Rothstein and I had the honor of representing Carroll County at the Shock Trauma Gala on Saturday, this past Saturday evening. And they continue to have an incredible success rate down there, 96% survival rate. And that's amazing if you can get them there in that golden hour. And I would say anywhere in the world doesn't see what we have here in Maryland. So from time to time, since I've been serving on the board, I have asked for a one-time stipend be given to Shock Trauma. We've done $25,000 in the past, and this is used for educational, continuing education for the nurses and physicians down there, as most of the other counties do. I'm looking to attempt to do that again. Just a couple statistics. Shock Trauma treated 338 residents of Carroll County in the past year. So we rely on them a great deal, including some of our law enforcement folks that had to be sent there. So I'm asking for $25,000 to be taken out of reserve for contingencies now to be sent to Shock Trauma for this continuing effort.
So I will make that
Discussion.
motion. Let me first make that motion, and if we continue to carry, we can have a bit of a discussion. But I would like to make that motion in taking $25,000 out of our reserve contingency for Shock Trauma.
Is there a second?
I was going to say, you both make the same motion, so.
But I didn't make the motion.
Okay.
No, I
okay.
didn't. I just,
Right.
I put it out
That's what I
there,
thought.
that's all.
Okay.
Okay.
That's
So
what I
I
thought.
didn't do that.
So
Okay.
I apologize. I made the motion.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'll second
I
it.
guess I was thinking you would.
Yeah, so I'll second it. And I understand, all of us are dealing with an incredible challenge here as we continue with the upcoming FY20 budget and beyond. But I think this particular item is critically important, not only to show support for something that is unlike anywhere in the world, but showing that we have that ability to work with them as they assist us in many areas.
I do
So
wanna ask
I'm
one
not going to
question.
I'm not going to oversell this.
Right.
Where does that money go?
So all of that money goes to continuing education. So what happens is down there, certainly we know that they're funded by the state of Maryland through the driver's license fees and that type of thing. We get that, and that's actually a big part of the funding that keeps the helicopters in the air, because without that, they wouldn't be able to. What they can't do with that money is provide educational seminars and continuing ed for the folks that work there. So the nursing staff, the physicians, the respiratory therapists, everyone who wears the pink scrubs is required to go through continuing education. And that's where the monies from the surrounding jurisdictions go into, and that's what they use for that.
It's not going into the University of Maryland
No.
Medical Fund? It
No,
can't be.
it is not.
Okay.
No, it is specific,
Yeah.
and I get your question,
Yeah.
Commissioner
Yep.
Weaver, loud and clear, I got it. It goes specifically into the special education fund, specifically for the University of Maryland shock trauma.
The,
I had to ask that.
You
No,
you
it-
did, that's fine, I appreciate that.
Absolutely, and just, again, not to oversell, but to share, during the gala, what they do is they bring an individual that has gone through trauma and tragedy, needing the shock trauma services for survival. And this young gentleman went through that without telling the whole story. But the key to this money going to training and education, it's not just the shock trauma facility and folks, he went to a hospital beforehand, so it was them identifying his needs, his critical needs that had to be transferred to shock trauma. It was the occupational therapy and all the therapies afterwards. So the more training and education that's provided throughout the community on the shock trauma capabilities, the more success shock trauma itself is going to have. So it's, yes, it goes to training and education within shock trauma, but they have such a scope of education training that hits the entire state along with the entire world. So I just want to
Yeah, that's a
add
good
that
point.
on, that it's not just the pink scrubs in the room, it's the entire community,
And,
so.
and part of that funding came back to Carroll last year as a result of the Stop the Bleed kits that we're seeing in
That's
all of
right.
our schools now. As a matter of fact, Carroll County was the first jurisdiction to get the Stop the Bleed education training from what they call their Center for Injury Prevention and Policy, which is sort of a branch of shock trauma. So, and I got some statistics on that too. 78 training sessions last year across the state. Over 2,400 citizens had that, and they go into high schools, and they're providing that kind of training for youth. So, so very good point.
Well,
So
I'd
anyway,
like to add that I went through shock trauma. Had it not been for shock trauma, I might not be here today, having been a victim of a home invasion. I got the helicopter ride and everything, and had it not been for their resources and their training, I might not be living today. So they were very instrumental in saving my life, and they continue to save other people's lives.
All right, so with that said, I know we might have to jump through a hoop or something officially to do that. I don't know what, but.
Call for vote?
Say it.
Quit selling.
Call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm glad you didn't oversell it, though.
Thank you. All right, anything else? Okay.
Nothing for me, just signing.
Yeah, some signatures are required. I'm going to entertain a motion to recess until 1 PM, and we'll be downstairs in the Reagan Room for a glorious afternoon of talking about budget.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
See you at 1 o'clock.